I need to tell you something, not the version I've rehearsed, not the one that sounds good, lands right, makes me seem like a man who has his emotions organized in clean, labeled drawers. I need to tell you the other version, the one I've been carrying since before I even knew you existed. Since before I knew that the shape of the ache inside me was actually you, the absence of you, the silhouette of someone I hadn't met yet. I'm not good at this. I want you to know that first. I want you to know it before anything else, because everything else I am going to say depends on you understanding that this, what I'm doing right now, talking to you like this, without the armor, without the performance, this is the hardest thing I have ever done. And I have done hard things. I have built things from nothing. I have stood in rooms where the odds were laughing at me, and I smiled back and I kept going. I have survived failures that other men made into tombstones. I have been cold and I have been broke, and I have been so tired that the only thing keeping me upright was the next deadline. But this, talking to you honestly, letting you see me, this is harder. There's a photograph. You'll never see it because it doesn't exist, because no one thought to take it. Of me at 29 years old, sitting alone in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of a building with my name on the lease. It was 3 a.m. The city was below me doing its patient, indifferent thing, and I was staring at a spreadsheet that represented, objectively, a very successful quarter. Numbers in the right columns, projections trending upward. Every metric I had defined as success met, and I felt nothing, not the good kind of nothing, not peace, not the earned stillness of a man who has worked hard and is resting. This was the other kind, the hollow kind, the kind that tells you, very quietly, very clearly, without drama or decoration, that you have been optimizing for the wrong thing. I had built a life the way you build a machine, deliberately, efficiently, every gear meshing with the next, every variable accounted for, every possible point of failure identified and engineered around. I had been relentless about it. I was the kind of person other people call driven, which is a generous word for a particular kind of running away. I was driving, yes, I was also fleeing. I'd been fleeing since I was 8 years old from a feeling I couldn't name then and spent decades refusing to name after. The feeling was this: I am not enough as I am. I am only enough as what I produce. That was the operating system. That was the code running underneath everything else. Wait. Before you scroll, I know, the title brought you here and part of you expected something different, something softer, something simpler. A love song dressed up as a speech. But stay. Because this is a love story. It just starts in the dark, the way the real ones always do. Stay here with me. Because what I want to tell you, what I am trying to get to, through all of this excavation and confession, is that I have loved you for longer than I have known you. I have been building toward you without realizing it, and I have also been building walls that kept you out without realizing that either. And the story of how I finally understood the difference between those two things, that is the story I owe you. That is the thing I need you to hear before you decide anything about us, so stay. I built an image first. That was always step one. Before the career, before the company, before the reputation, I built the image, the version of myself that was capable and composed and quietly, impressively in control. I built it the way a child builds anything, instinctively in response to an environment, out of whatever materials were available. And the material that was available was this. Attention came when I performed. Warmth came when I achieved. The room felt safer when I had the right answer. I learned it so young I thought it was just the truth about the world. I thought, this is how people are. This is how connection works. You bring your best self, your most useful, most impressive, most capable self, and in exchange you are permitted to belong. So that's what I did. I brought my best self. Every day, relentlessly, with extraordinary consistency. I was never the most naturally gifted person in a room, but I was nearly always the most prepared, the most persistent, the most willing to grind the gap between where I was and where I needed to be into dust through sheer, unreasonable, sustained effort. And it worked. I thought it worked. I built a business. I built a name. I built mornings that started before the sun and evenings that ended long after it, and a schedule so tightly filled that there was genuinely no space for the question I was most afraid of, which was, who are you when you stop? I thought the question was a trap. I thought stillness was a kind of failure. I thought if I ever stopped moving, if I ever let the engine cool and sat down in the silence with nothing to accomplish, I would find out something terrible about myself. I was right to be afraid, just wrong about what I would find. Tell me something, did you ever love someone who wasn't really there? Someone who was physically present, sitting across from you, nodding in the right places, saying the right things, but who was fundamentally, structurally absent, whose attention was a kind of performance, pleasant on the surface but hollow underneath, because the real version of them was somewhere else entirely, in a spreadsheet, in a strategy, in a future that hadn't happened yet? I was that person. I was that person to everyone who tried to get close to me, and I didn't know it. That is the thing I need you to understand. I wasn't withholding presence deliberately. I wasn't playing games or protecting myself consciously. I had simply never learned how to be in a room the way the room was asking me to be in it. I had never learned how to let a moment just be a moment. Not a data point, not a problem to solve, not a resource to be allocated. Just a moment, alive and irreplaceable, worth the full weight of my attention. I had been passing through my own life for years, and when I met you, the first time that ordinary Tuesday in a place neither of us would have chosen, something happened that I did not have the language for. You said something small, something that most people would have said in passing and forgotten by the next morning, and I remember it with the kind of precision I usually only have for things that matter to the machine. I remember the light. I remember the exact distance between where you were standing and where I was standing. I remember thinking, for just a second, a single unguarded second before the armor snapped back into place, I want to be known by her, not impressed, not admired, not needed, known. That was new. Here's what I learned about fear, not the fear I was used to. The productive kind, the kind that sharpens focus and powers performance. The fear of falling short, of missing the mark, of being outworked or outmaneuvered. That fear I had made into an ally. I had that fear on a leash. That fear did what I told it. The fear of being known was a different species entirely. That fear didn't respond to management. It didn't get better with preparation. You can't rehearse your way out of it. You can't build a strategy that makes genuine transparency safe. The only way through it is through it, naked, undefended, with no guarantee of what's on the other side. And I was not equipped for that. I had a full suite of tools for managing the external world and absolutely nothing for managing the interior one. I could negotiate a contract, calm a crisis, rebuild a failed project from the wreckage upward, but to sit in front of a person who was looking at me, really looking, not at the image, but at the person behind it, and to let that be real, to not redirect or deflect or fill the space with something impressive. I had no tools for that, so I did what I always did when I encountered something I couldn't manage. I built around it. I became very good at the intimacy that doesn't require vulnerability. I was warm, I was charming, I was thoughtful about birthdays and perceptive about needs and genuinely interested in the people around me, as long as the interest flowed outward, as long as I got to be the curious one, the helpful one, the one directing the attention of the conversation like a camera that was always pointed away from myself, and it worked. For a while it always works, until you, look at me for a second. I need you to hear this next part clearly because it is the most important thing I have ever tried to say. You did not fix me. I need to say that because I have watched too many love stories built on the architecture of rescue, where one person arrives broken and the other arrives whole, and the whole one pours themselves into the broken one until they are both emptied out. That is not what happened between us. That is not what I am asking you to be. You are not my therapist. You are not my solution. You are not responsible for the excavation that happened inside me, the slow, uncomfortable daily work of dismantling a false self that had been load-bearing for 3 decades. That work was mine. What you did that changed everything was something simpler and more radical. You stayed in the room with me when I was showing you something real, when the performance slipped, when I was tired or scared or uncertain in a way I couldn't polish into something presentable. You didn't look away. You didn't offer a silver lining or redirect toward the positive or tell me who I should be to feel better. You just stayed, you sat with me in the difficult, unresolved, not yet figured out truth of whatever was happening, and you let it be real, and you didn't leave, and I didn't know what to do with that. I had been so careful, so systematically careful. I had calibrated every relationship in my life to operate at the exact depth where warmth was possible, but exposure wasn't. I had learned the distance, the specific distance you could maintain and still be called close, still be called intimate, still feel like you had people, like you weren't alone. I had been living at that distance for years and calling it connection. You walked past it like it wasn't even there. I thought, God, the things I thought love was a transaction. I thought it worked the way everything else worked. Effort in, return out. I thought if I showed up consistently, if I delivered on the implicit promises of a relationship, if I was capable and present and useful enough, then love would be secured. Renewable. Mine by merit. I thought if I just performed well enough for long enough, I would eventually feel safe. I thought the goal was to never need anything. I thought needing was weakness, and weakness was the thing that made people leave. I had learned this before I had the words for it. I had absorbed it from the environment of my earliest years, the way children absorb everything, not through teaching, but through the texture of daily life, through the emotional weather of the rooms they grew up in. I had learned that approval was earned, and that the earning was conditional, and that the conditions could shift without warning. So I became very, very good at anticipating the conditions. I became an expert at the emotional climate of every room I entered. I could read what was needed and provide it with stunning reliability. And I was so proud of this. I thought it was a skill. I thought it was emotional intelligence. It wasn't what it was. What I know now, after all of the uncomfortable work of actually looking at it, was a survival strategy that had outlived its environment. It was a 5-year-old solution to a grown man's life. It was sophisticated, and it was thorough, and it had costs I was still only beginning to understand. Don't deny it. You've felt this. Some version of this belongs to you too. I know it does, because it belongs to nearly everyone who has ever tried to love someone while being secretly terrified of what love requires. The performance, the management, the careful, exhausting work of being good enough to stay. You know the feeling of holding yourself slightly back, of offering 90% and protecting the last 10 like it's the only thing you actually own, of being generous with time and resources and attention and laughter and everything that looks like openness, while the interior, the actual interior, the room where the real things live, remains locked. You know what it is to be lonely inside a relationship, to be with someone and still alone, to be seen and still hidden. I had lived there for years. I had furnished that loneliness so well it almost looked like peace. And then you asked me something, a simple question, on an ordinary evening, the kind of question that shouldn't have reached the places it reached. You asked, what do you actually want? Not from work, not from the future as you'd planned it. You asked, what do you actually want? In the way that meant not the acceptable answer, not the strategic answer, not the answer that makes you sound like a man who has it together. What do you actually genuinely, in the part of yourself you've never let me see, want? And I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. And that silence, that sudden, exposed, impossible silence, was the most honest thing I had ever offered anyone. Here's what I learned about the altar. I had been building on one my whole life, not a metaphor I would have chosen. I'm not a poetic man by nature. I'm a practical one. I like things that are true in useful ways, but it's the most accurate thing I've found for what I had been doing. An altar is a place where you sacrifice something in the hope of receiving something else, where you give up what's real in exchange for what's promised. I had been sacrificing presence for progress. I had been sacrificing depth for productivity. I had been sacrificing the life in front of me for the life I was planning to have once I had achieved whatever the next threshold was. There was always a next threshold. That's the design. The threshold is never the last one because the threshold isn't actually about achievement. It's about the terror underneath achievement, the formless, nameless thing that the achievement is supposed to be big enough to cover. And it never is. No amount of success is large enough to fill an interior wound. The wound requires different medicine. The wound requires the thing you're most afraid to do. The wound requires you to stop, to put down the building materials and sit in the unfinished room and let it be unfinished and stay anyway. That is what you invited me to do, not in those words, not with a plan or a system or a gentle speech about vulnerability. You just stopped performing back. You just let there be silence without rushing to fill it. You just existed fully in the room with me and waited, and I felt the altar for the first time. I felt what I had been giving up. Wait, before you go any further with me, I need to tell you what I'm actually asking. I'm not asking you to love me the way I've been loved before. The transactional love. The love that is really approval with a longer contract. The love that says, keep being this impressive, keep having this together, keep delivering on the image, and I will stay. I don't want that love anymore. I spent so long working for it. And it is the loneliest love that exists because it never actually reaches you. It reaches the performance. It rewards the armor. And the actual person inside the armor, the one who is uncertain sometimes and frightened sometimes and who doesn't have the answer and is still figuring out enormous things about who he is and what he wants. That person has never been loved. I am asking you to love that person, and I know that is a large ask. I know it because I am only beginning. Only at the very beginning, still uncomfortable. Still reaching for the old management strategies, still sometimes catching myself redirecting the conversation when it gets too close. I am only beginning to understand what it feels like to be that person, to inhabit the interior, to stop managing from the outside and start actually living from within. But here's what I know. Here's what the excavation has uncovered underneath all the achievement and the armor and the relentless, brilliant, exhausting machine of it. I love you. Not the idea of you, not the version of you that makes my life look a certain way or fills a particular shaped absence. I love the actual, specific, real-time, unedited version of you. The way you are honest when honesty is uncomfortable. The way you stay in the room. The way you ask the questions that reach the places I've been keeping locked and don't apologize for asking them. The way you laugh, which is the most unperformed thing I have ever heard. The way you are, the sheer irreplaceable fact of your actual existence, does something to the interior of my life that nothing I have ever built has done. You make me want to be present. Not impressive. Present. The rebuilding was not a revelation. I want to be honest about this because I think you deserve the undramatic truth, not the cinematic version. There was no single moment where everything shifted and I became a new man. There was no morning. I woke up and the fear was gone and the armor was dismantled and I was suddenly the version of myself I had always wanted to be. It was Tuesday mornings. It was choosing to put the phone face down at dinner and stay in the conversation, even when the conversation was hard. It was calling back when I would have previously let it ring, because I was busy, because I was building something, because the machine needed tending. It was sitting in therapy. Yes, therapy, the thing I had quietly considered a kind of surrender for most of my adult life, and now understand is the most rigorous, most demanding, most honest work I have ever done. And saying things out loud that I had never said out loud before, and surviving the saying of them. It was small things. It was the decision made and remade every single day to choose presence over productivity. Not always, not perfectly. I still fail this some mornings. The machine still fires up sometimes without permission. The old patterns have deep roots, and deep roots don't just release when you decide they should, but the direction has changed. I am building differently now. Here's what I learned about home. Not the word the way it means a building, a structure, a place with an address. I mean home the way it means the interior experience of your own life. The feeling, which I thought for years was just a thing other people had, a thing I was constitutionally incapable of. The feeling of being without qualification or performance or ongoing proof of worthiness enough. Here. Real. Permitted. I thought I had to earn home. I thought it was a destination you arrived at after sufficient achievement. That there was a threshold of success past which you would finally feel settled in your own skin. Finally feel like the life you were living was actually yours. Finally feel like you could put the armor down and the world would still hold. There is no such threshold. I know that now. I know it because I passed every threshold I set for myself and the feeling never came. The feeling doesn't come from the outside. It was never going to come from the outside. The home I was looking for was interior. The permission I needed was my own. And you, sitting with me in that room, asking the question that silenced me, staying in the silence rather than rescuing me from it. You were the first person who showed me that the interior was accessible, that it was safe to go there. That going there, with the right person alongside, was not the frightening freefall I had been dreading my whole life. It was the opposite. It was landing. Look at me for a second. I know how this sounds. I know the man who says these things in movies is usually performing them. Performing vulnerability the way you perform strength, for effect, for the desired response, for the warmth that follows. I know you have reason to be careful. I know you have been in rooms before where someone said beautiful things and meant something smaller. I am asking you to stay in this room with me anyway. Not because I have it figured out, not because the work is done, or the armor is fully dismantled, or the fear of being known has been transformed into something comfortable and safe. I am asking you to stay because I am willing to do the work. Because I am already doing the work. Because for the first time in my life I have something to build toward that is more important than anything I have built before. Not a company, not a reputation, not a version of myself that looks good from the outside. A life that feels true from the inside. A home, our home, not just a structure, not just an address. A home in the real sense. A place where both of us can put the performance down. Where we don't have to be impressive to be welcome. Where the difficult conversations get had because the foundation is strong enough to hold them. Where I am known, the actual, unedited, still figuring it out version, and loved anyway. That is what I am building toward, and I cannot do it without you. Tell me something. What did you think love would feel like? Before you had been disappointed enough times to revise the answer, before the experiences that made you careful and selective and rightfully slow to trust, what did you imagine when you were young enough to still be imagining? What did you picture when you thought about the person you would love? I think you thought it would feel like safety. I think you thought it would feel like being seen, not the performance, not the curated version, not the best foot forward public-facing edition, but seen, actually seen. The whole complex, contradictory, sometimes exhausted, sometimes brilliant, sometimes fragile, real person that you are. I think you thought love would feel like home, and I think some part of you stopped believing in that version. Some experiences made you practical, made you sensible, made you protective of yourself in the entirely reasonable way that people become when they have offered something real and had it handled carelessly. I am asking you to believe in it one more time. With me, not because I am perfect, not because I have nothing left to learn or heal or figure out. I am asking you to believe in it because I know with a certainty that comes from somewhere much deeper than strategy, that what we have, when we are honest with each other, when the performance is down and the room is quiet and we are just two actual people in the same actual moment, is something real. It is the most real thing I have ever been part of. Here's what I learned about love, not the love I was used to. Not the conditional love, the love that is really approval on an extended contract, the love that says I will stay as long as you keep being this. I mean the other love, the love that is honestly terrifying because it has no conditions, because it reaches past the performance to the person, and the person, undefended, is frightening to offer. I had been afraid of that love my whole life, not because I didn't want it, because I wanted it more than anything and had spent decades building an identity that was structurally incompatible with receiving it, because the version of me that had been constructed, the capable, impressive, has-it-together version, could not be loved that way, could not be loved at all in the real sense, could only be admired. Admiration is not love. Admiration is what you give to a performance. Love is what you give to a person. I had spent 36 years being admired, and one ordinary Tuesday you looked at me, not at the image, at me, and something in you decided to stay, and I have been trying, every day since, to be worthy of that decision. Not by being more impressive, not by performing more effectively or building more visibly or demonstrating capability in increasingly refined ways, by being more honest, by showing up more fully, by choosing, when the old reflex fires and I reach for the armor, to put it back down and stay in the room instead, by becoming someone you can actually know, future wife. I don't know when you are reading this, when these words are reaching you, whether we've already found our way to each other, or whether we are still in the time before we became us. I don't know what distance currently exists between where I am and where you are, or what it will take to close it. But I know this. I know I am building toward you with everything I have that is actually real. Not the achievement, not the empire. The foundation, the actual foundation, the one being laid in the uncomfortable interior work, in the therapy sessions, in the honest conversations, in the moments of choosing presence over productivity. The foundation that can hold a real thing. The foundation that is made from truth rather than image. I am building a home you can actually live in. A home where you don't have to be smaller to make me feel larger. Where your presence is not a threat to my identity, but the best evidence that my identity is finally something true. Where we are honest about the hard things before they become the destructive things. Where we rest, where we sit in the comfortable, earned, extraordinary, ordinary silence of two people who have decided to be genuinely, completely, vulnerably real with each other, and found that the world, improbably, held. I know what I am asking. I am asking you to trust a man who is still becoming, who is doing the work but is not finished, who will miss the mark sometimes, not from lack of caring, but from the depth of the grooves worn by 36 years of a different way of being, and who will every time come back, choose back, put the armor down again, and stay in the room again and choose you again. Not perfectly, truly, don't deny it, you feel it too. Whatever space exists between us right now, whatever words haven't been said yet, whatever version of us is still in the future, you feel the truth of this. You feel the rarity of it, the particular quality of the real thing when it's actually in the room with you. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let the sensible, protective, I've been disappointed before part of you win this one. That part of you is trying to keep you safe. I understand it. I honor it. I know where it came from, and it came from somewhere real, and it has served you. But there is a version of safety that is just a very convincing loneliness. There is a version of caution that is just a very organized absence. You deserve more than that. We deserve more than that. Here's what I want our life to feel like. I want it to feel like Tuesday evenings with nothing to accomplish, like the particular quality of time when the day is done and the ambitions are resting, and we are just two people in a room, present and unhurried, with nothing to prove to each other or to the world. I want it to feel like the conversations that happen past midnight when honesty is easier because the performance is too tired to sustain itself and what comes out is just the real thing. Unedited, uncertain, true. I want it to feel like being known, not the highlights, not the version that makes the good impression, the full picture, the difficult mornings and the ungenerous moments and the days when I fall back into old patterns and need to be called back, gently, firmly, by someone who loves me enough to tell the truth. I want it to feel like being loved anyway, not despite the imperfection, not in spite of the unfinished work, in the presence of it, alongside it, with a full understanding that the work of becoming is never finished, and that you are not here to wait for me to be finished before you love me. You are here to love me while I become, and I am here. I will be here. I am building toward being here, to love you the same way, to love the version of you that is still becoming, to love the uncertainty and the complexity and the places where you are still excavating, to stay in the room with all of it, to choose you, not the image of you. The collapse when it came for me, that 3 a.m. moment in the glass-walled office with the spreadsheet showing success and the interior showing nothing, was mercy. I didn't experience it that way. I experienced it as failure, as evidence that something was fundamentally broken in me, that I had missed something essential, that the machine I had built, for all its impressive output, had somehow failed at the most important function. I was devastated by the emptiness. I was ashamed of it. I hid it. And then, slowly, through work and time and honesty and eventually through you, I came to understand what it actually was. It was an invitation. The emptiness was not a verdict. It was a clearing. The collapse was not the building coming down. It was the altar being demolished. It was the thing I had been sacrificing myself on, finally being unable to hold the weight of what I was placing on it, and giving way, and in giving way, making room for the real foundation, making room for something that could actually hold a life, making room for you. I was so close to getting this wrong. I was so close, measured in months, in a different set of choices, in a version of that Tuesday where I looked away instead of letting myself be seen, to spending my entire life being impressive and never being known, to building the most elaborate, most well-maintained, most carefully optimized prison in the world and calling it a home. I was so close to missing you, not just you specifically. The whole category of thing you represent, presence, truth, the interior life, the actual experience of being alive rather than the management of its appearance. I was so close to staying in the glass office forever, watching the city from above, confusing distance for perspective, confusing productivity for purpose. You pulled me back from that, not with a speech, not with a plan. Just by asking the question I couldn't answer and staying in the silence when I had nothing, just by being exactly who you are. Future wife, please don't leave, not because I need you in, the way that frightened, armored people need, as a stabilizer, as a filler of interior gaps, as someone whose presence proves that I am worth staying for. Not that need. I have done enough of the work now to know the difference between that need and this one. I need you the way a person who has finally found home needs to stay in it. Not because they can't survive outside. Not because the outside is too frightening or too cold, but because the inside, the actual, real, honest interior of this thing between us, is the truest place they have ever been. And having been there, having had the extraordinary experience of being actually known and staying anyway, and being loved, not despite the complexity but alongside it, having had that, the idea of leaving it is not frightening. It is simply wrong. It is factually, fundamentally wrong in the way that leaving home is wrong when home is real. I love you, not the performance of loving you, not the version designed to secure you or impress you or demonstrate that I am the kind of man worth choosing. The actual thing, the real, interior, unmanaged, I have no strategy, here I am just telling you the truth thing. I love you, and I am building a life worthy of that love, brick by brick, day by day, Tuesday by Tuesday, with presence instead of performance, with honesty instead of impression, with the foundation where the altar used to be, with a home where the empire used to stand. Here's what I know. The most important thing I will ever build is not something the world can measure. It is not visible from outside. It will not appear in any metric or ranking or external assessment of my life. It cannot be evaluated at 3 a.m. by a spreadsheet, however sophisticated. The most important thing I will ever build is this, us, the real version of us, the honest, undefended, fully present, choosing each other deliberately every day version. The version that doesn't require a performance to sustain it. The version that is built on the understanding that love is not a destination you arrive at through sufficient achievement, but a practice, a daily radical act of choosing to see and be seen. I am choosing that, I am choosing you, and I am asking, not performing the asking, not presenting the asking in the most favorable light. Genuinely, from the only room in me that has ever been fully real. Stay. Let me love you the way you deserve, not perfectly, truly. Let me build something we can actually live in. Let me be home.